From newscasts to a multi-platform news universe, please welcome from Trescat, from Barcelona, Medir Plandolit.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you to be here at this time in the last conference of today. And thank you for the opportunity to share what is probably the deepest transformation process of our new systems since the creation of Catalan Public Broadcasting Corporation. 3 years ago, I would found it very useful to listen to someone explain their own transformation process. So today, I will try to do exactly that. Not only explain what we did, but share what we learned. For 4 years, we have done one thing very well. We have explained the world from a studio. The television newscast was the center of gravity of our entire news system. Everything was organized around television schedules. It was a clear model, a stable and successful model. You have to know that nowadays in Catalonia, Trescat is the undisputed leader on television. And this is very important because it means that our transformation process did not emerge from a crisis. It emerged from a successful model that understood that the world was changing around it. Well, today we are still on it. And the transformation did not begin with technology. It began when we accepted that television was no longer the only center of gravity in people's relationship with news. Audience habits were changing much faster than we were able to change our structures. And there was a deeper concern behind that tension. The greatest risk was not losing traditional audience. The greatest risk was becoming irrelevant to a new generation that already consumes information with completely different habits, platforms, and expectations. But the key issue was that we were not always responding to what people actually needed. There was a growing gap between citizen needs and the way we were telling stories. And when the gap appears, other actors, even individuals, start to occupy that space. People still wanted reliable information, context, and public service. We were no longer competing only for prime time. We were competing for attention at any moment of the day. And we were still thinking in terms of channels. Sometimes today, we were still on it. That is where our transformation begins. Not because we simply wanted to do more digital, but because we wanted to remain relevant to citizens. The challenge was structural too. For decades, we had built two strong but separate cultures, television and radio, physically and mentally separate. And before fully aligning them, a third dimension appeared, digital. So the real change was to align three ecosystems with different logic and cultures. For the launch of Trescat Info, we worked to make these three ecosystems operate together with digital presence of the editorial process. The next step will be physical integration, obviously. There was something else pushing us too, the data. News consumption was already predominantly digital, while interest in news was declining. In fact, in Catalonia, the decline in news interest has been among the most significant in Europe. For a public service media organization, this is not just a market indicator. This is a really democratic warning sign. The question was no longer just how we distributed content. The real question was how do we remain a trusted reference point in a changing information environment, maintaining leadership and quality. Before changing structures, we made one decision. This transformation had to be shared. So more than 250 professionals took part in a participatory process in 20 sessions, not just to collect ideas, but to build legitimacy and start changing culture. From that process, we define a shared purpose. We also define a very clear value proposition, and a clear objective. And we also made a key decision. We needed a new identity because our news content was fragmented across 4 different brands. We needed a single brand to unify television, radio, and digital. Platform fragmentation forced us to think as an ecosystem, not as a separate brands, because people do not care how our newsroom is organized. This is why we create Trescat.info, our new news brand. And we summarize this editorial shift in 3 simple words: inform, explain, understand. Not as a slogan, but as a commitment to how we serve citizens. But defining our purpose and creating a new brand was not enough. We also needed to understand citizens directly. For us, putting citizens at the center was not just a statement. It meant listening to their needs and designing the product with them. We created permanent feedback loops with citizens, focus groups, and testing panels that directly shaped our decisions. In fact, some features of the app and even specific content of sections were built directly from citizen feedback. At the beginning, when we start talking about transformation, we were asking the wrong question. How do we adapt broadcast to digital? But the question kept the center of gravity exactly where it had always been. The right question was different. How can we serve citizens better in a multi-platform environment? And to answer that question, we started from what citizens told us. The challenge was no longer simply producing journalism. The challenge was making journalism useful in people's daily life. For years, we focused on producing more and faster. Now we also needed to optimize consumption. We adapted the BBC user needs, but we reframed them around citizen needs. And more important, we adapted the framework to our context and defined 3 major needs: inform, explain, and connect. At that moment, we understood something decisive. The transformation was not technological, it was editorial, because we were no longer starting with the story, we were starting with the need. From there, we began designing new products and format based on the needs we had defined, with the aim of placing citizens and content at the center of our entire ecosystem. And once we had redefined our editorial logic, we needed to translate it into concrete storytellings. Now I would like to show you 3 examples of this approach in practice. This video celebrates reaching 700,000 followers on Instagram in Catalan 2 months ago. Today, we connect with almost 1 in every 13 Catalan speakers worldwide. For us, this is not just a metric. It is proof that journalism in Catalan can build community and remain relevant on global platforms. And it also reflects our intention to place citizens' needs at the center. Today, we have 749,000 followers. Go on.
A darrere de cada persona hi ha una història.
Què ens uneix amb les persones que estimem, que hem estimat, que estimarem?
No podem obviar tot el talent que hi ha darrere la discapacitat.
Donem tanta importància a coses que en realitat no ho són.
Soc la tia més feliç del món, però què faig?
Que tú sabes que han abandonado a un pobre.
Es quien omite su deber, quien comete el acto que deriva en sus muertes.
Está estem lluitant fent el que no fan els governs, els estats, els poders.
Volem lluitar per aquest dret de quedar-nos a casa nostra.
No podem oferir aquesta qualitat que tenen dret als alumnes a tenir.
Els nens i nenes hem de ser partícips perquè són el futur.
En aquests moments vivim en una societat molt convulsa.
Això és campi i rellis, això no és pas sèrio.
És qüestió de parlar bé el teu idioma.
Per davant de tot hi hauria d'haver el respecte per les persones.
The second video reflects a very simple idea. If audience wants to understand better, we must explain better. This means adapting our storytelling to be more clearer, more accessible, and more useful.
Què fas? El llences tot? Li treus la part afectada?
Va arribar la humanitat a la Lluna? Aquesta és potser la història amb més negacionistes del món.
L'AC-16 que uneix Barcelona amb la Cerdanya va de sud a nord.
Quan et despertis, no et llancis al mòbil. La forma d'escriure, quins emojis, quines expressions utilitzem.
Gairebé 500.000 van fugir a l'exili.
Pel context històric, la Guerra Freda, calia guanyar la cursa espacial.
Pluges d'estel, superllunes, alineacions de planetes.
S'ha publicat una part dels milions d'arxius de la investigació del cas.
Pujar fins a 5.500 metres d'altura.
Que l'avió perdi o guanyi uns metres d'altura de forma sobtada.
I si anem al detall, què passa dins el nostre cervell?
And this third example connects with one of the key challenges we face, disinformation. As part of the transformation, we created a new verification unit, not only to check facts, but to build new formats to help people distinguish what is true from what is not.
Aquesta explosió no ha passat. Per simular-la només calen 10 minuts i no t'has de gastar ni un euro. Amb més temps i amb més diners podria fer-se encara més realista. Fer un vídeo amb intel·ligència artificial és així de fàcil. I des que va començar la guerra a l'Orient Mitjà, les xarxes en van plenes, afegint-hi confusió. Segons aquestes imatges falses, per exemple, Tel Aviv estaria convertida en runes. Això no és cert. La destrucció no és ni general ni majoritària. La realitat és que Tel Aviv ha rebut impactes de míssils, però no està totalment destruïda ni de bon tros. Per què corren tant aquestes imatges? Òbviament, perquè són molt realistes, però també perquè la censura militar israeliana frena imatges d'impactes en llocs sensibles i això fa créixer la sensació que no s'està explicant la realitat. Però no només han circulat imatges falses d'Israel. També està fet a MIA aquest vídeo del Burj Khalifa a Dubai, l'edifici més alt del món, envoltat d'avions de guerra i amb flames. El cert és que el Burj Khalifa no va patir cap atac, però sí que en va patir un al Burj El Arab, també a Dubai, o un edifici d'apartaments a Bahrain. Qui fa aquests vídeos a MIA busca dues coses, o fer propaganda per un dels bàndols o fer diners. Davant d'aquesta inundació d'IA, el millor és desconfiar dels vídeos que apareguin en els primers moments d'una crisi. Si realment ens importa la història, ens serà més útil esperar confirmacions de fonts fiables. Les imatges seran menys espectaculars i no arribaran tan ràpid, però seran més reals.
But while we were rethinking content, we also needed a product capable of organizing it and transforming it into a native digital experience. So we launched a new web website. Our ambition was simple. When someone picked up their phone to get informed, Trescat Info has to become one of their natural choices. In terms of user experience, the platform is built around 3 strategic bets. Vertical video, first one, not as an experiment anymore, but as a central news format because vertical video is not a youth format. It is simply how many people now watch and consume news. We gave vertical videos a major presence on the homepage, integrating both original news videos and social-first content directly into the experience. Second, journalists. In an environment of fragmentation, disinformation, and declining trust, we decided to give greater visibility to our journalists because credibility remains our most valuable asset. And third, personalization. In short, we stopped thinking in terms of pages and started thinking in terms of experiences. This transformation also changed how we think about distribution. We no longer see platforms as secondary channel used to promote content created somewhere else. Platforms are now part of editorial experience itself that forced us to rethink formats, language, rhythm, and workflows without losing our identity. Because the challenge for a public service newsroom is not simply to be present on platforms, the challenge is to remain recognizable in algorithmic environments. Our response was to build a dual ecosystem, one platform to build loyalty, depth, and long-term relationships, external platform to drive discovery and reach new audience. That balance became one of the foundations of Trescat.info model. We expanded our presence across social and messaging platforms, launched a daily podcast and newsletter products, and this autumn we'll expand further into TikTok and YouTube. WhatsApp is probably the clearest example of this strategy. Today, it has become the leading news channel in Catalan for service-oriented journalism designed for every use. If we put all these pieces together, this is what our ecosystem looks like. At the center, content shaped by citizen needs, and around it, different platforms, formats, and entry points. The key idea is simple. We no longer think in channels, we think in a connected system designed to reach people wherever they already are. And once you design a system like this, one question becomes critical. How do we make this sustainable over time? It's not easy. To sustain this, we had to change governance. We created a transversal head of digital news, an editor-in-chief roles across TV, radio, and digital. Digital had to be at the editorial table, not out of it. And we also redesigned meetings and strengthened daily coordination between sections, TV, radio, and digital. And we learned something important. Transversality increases complexity. You have to manage it. The coordination effort required from managers has increased more than we expected before we launched. And this is a very important point for us. And I want to be very honest. This process has not been easy. The big question has been, and still is today, what do we stop doing? Because transforming with limited resource means deciding what you reduce in order to grow somewhere else. And one of the greatest difficulties came 9 months before launch. At the exact moment when we most needed the strengthened teams, the organization entered a phase of human resource constraint. That forced us to reshape part of the project while it was already underway. We moved timelines, simplified some deployment teams, lines, and redesigned actions to make them possible with fewer people than we planned. But the most delicate part was not operational, it was cultural. Teams felt that the ambition remained very high while resources were not growing at the same pace. And here we learned something important. When you cannot protect resource, you must protect clarity. We invest many hours explaining decisions, setting priorities, and being very clear about what we will stop doing and why. And today I think that we had to invest more hours even. Because trust inside newsroom does not depend only on resource, it also depends on the clarity with which you manage uncertainty. And we learned something else. Transformation is not about only explaining, it's also about listening. Because in every newsroom there are people who move fast, people who hesitate, and people who resist change, and which is completely normal. So one of our key learnings was this. You need to identify these groups early and communicate differently with each of them, above all with people who hesitate. This is the key for us. Because without that, transformation does not move forward. It's impossible. So, 6 months after the launch of Trescat.info, there is an obvious question. Is it working? The early results clearly validate the direction of the transformation, and our platform's monthly video plays have almost tripled. An important part of the growth is explained by the introduction of short vertical videos on the homepage. On social platforms, video consumption has grown by almost 90%, At the same time, TV news programs have remained stable and have even grown slightly. This confirms something important for us. Digital transformation has not weakened our traditional windows. It has reinforced the entire ecosystem. But beyond consumption metrics, we wanted to know, or we wanted to understand something else. How do people perceive Trescat Info? So we launched a qualitative and quantitative study. The results were very clear. But the key insight was not the score, it was the association. People link Trescat Info with rigor, credibility, and usefulness, which means digital transformation has not weakened public service. It has reinforced it. There is one idea that for us marks a real turning point. We never saw the launch of Trescat Info as the end of the project. We saw it as the beginning of permanent optimization process. After the launch, we created a multidisciplinary team bringing together product analytics, growth, customer experience management, and editorial teams, because every improvement must combine user experience, data, and editorial logic. So we moved from a project logic to a live product logic, a model based on testing, learning, and constant adjustment. And in an organization with 40 years of broadcast culture, this shift is profound, because we no longer think in terms of projects that end, we think in terms of products that evolve continuously. After everything I have explained, and recognizing that the launch of Trescat Info has represented a major step forward for us, it's true, there are still three major challenges that today absorb a very important part of our attention. One of them, I have already mentioned it, what we stop doing. The second challenge is making digital first truly real. We have moved forward enormously compared with 3 years ago, but changing workflows, priority, habits, and culture inside large organizations takes time, a lot of time. And the third challenge is helping teams reorganize themselves around new audience needs. Today, a very important part of our effort is concentrated on these three areas. And this connects directly with the idea I mentioned earlier about optimization, because once product is alive, you realize that the transformation never really stops. And before I finish, what have we learned? Transformation is editorial, not technological. Governance matters as much as product. Transversality is necessary, but it has a cost, a very big cost. When resources are limited, clarity is everything. Transformation is not a project, it's something you have to keep working on time. And looking ahead, 3 priorities. News no longer waits to be found, it finds people, and public service media cannot wait to be discovered anymore. We needed to adapt journalism to the way people now discover news, without losing our identity, obviously. We are expanding into YouTube and TikTok, as I mentioned it before, and personalization and AI to deliver the most relevant content without breaking the shared public space. And I would like to finish with a sentence that we are no longer a broadcaster with a website. We are trying to become a truly multi-platform public service newsroom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Medir. And we have time for this afternoon's last question, so please. Something about the videos maybe, or, well, there's 2 already. What did you stop doing?
Okay. Can you say more about your YouTube plans? Okay, for example, are you targeting your younger people? How will you ensure you reach your local audience? Okay, we are working on it right now. Our plans is to launch our news channel in YouTube after the summer. And we are working to have a balance between documentaries, actually, and a lot of local content, because one of our more important things that we have today in Trescat is our local issues, local content. So we are a big mission with the Catalan language. So this is one of the key issues that we have to make after the summer. What did you stop doing? Yeah. This is, for me, the most important question. We are trying to stop doing, for example, we are trying to work in a non-duplicative system. 2 years ago, for example, or 3 years ago, to cover a story, we had 3, 4 TV teams and radio teams at the same place with 4 mics on the screen. We cannot do that. So we put a lot of efforts in order to be more efficient in our coordination between different newsrooms and teams, in order to avoid to find 3 TV teams at the same place with 3 mix of Trescat, for example. Did the workload for reported increase per story by introducing new platforms? Yeah. For us, it's very important to be clear with that. Our presence in new platforms is we have to looking for another balance between to be in new platforms and to maintain our relevance for citizens in our broadcast or in our radio station or in our website. So this is difficult to respond. What will you do less? Well, it's the same question that I mentioned before. We are trying to do less videos, for example, in TV newscast. We are trying to do less textual content on website. Even we try to do less radio content in our 24-hour channels, for example. So this is very important. 2 years ago, we had a digital team making 100% of the digital content. Now, we are trying to create digital content from TV journalists, radio journalists, and maintaining a digital team specialized. So 2 years ago, the digital content made by TV journalists was more than digital content made by radio journalists. So now we are trying to make a balance 50-50. So this is why we are trying to do less, and this is why we are trying to put focus on our coordination. Do you feel you have succeeded in retraining journalists with new skills? For example, radio people who now have to make video or write articles. Yeah. Well, I think that there are people who are making a very good television, there are people who are making a very good radio, and there are people who are making a very good digital content. Not everybody can do everything very well. So you have to be clear with that. You have to know very well who can be a content creator, and you have to know who can rest on TV content, because when you try to democratize the creation of digital content between TV journalists and radio journalists, is very difficult for us. So I think that we have to maintain digital content specialists and a TV content specialist and radio journalist specialist too. Do the same journalists to do the content for TV, radio, digital, social media, YouTube? Well, the editorial strategy is the same. The format not, obviously, but we are trying to maintain the same focus for each platform, and we are trying to maintain the same point of view from our editorial strategy. What more? Okay, today the world's turned into a 9/16 iPhone screen. What if the world chooses less screen time? What if everybody moved back to a Nokia? Maybe we will have more health saint for everybody. Well, if it happens, we will reach it. We will make something, but I not hope.
Maybe one more.
Do you consider yourselves to still be a local broadcaster? Yes, why not? We have a TV newscast edition for local news, and today is one of the best content that we have. And when you saw before the video from 700,000 followers on Instagram in Catalan today, the 80% of the content came from the local news, not from international news, not from the other news. It's the local news is our succeed for Instagram, not the others. So yes, I consider myself to still be a local broadcaster, and it's not a problem.
Thank you, Medir.
Thank you very much.